Welcome to the Think Factory podcast. We got one question for you. What keeps you up at night?
So welcome back to the Think Factory podcast. And I'm your host, Chris Santomassimo from OGC Solutions. And of course, we power the Think Factory podcast. And I'm really excited to be here today with Diane Abruzzini Riggs, who is the Chief Operating Officer from Rigorous Technology. Welcome to the podcast, Diane.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Great to be here.
So one of the reasons that I wanted to introduce Diane and Rigorous Technology is the fact that they are experts in creating and designing systems to do what everybody in the print and other manufacturing spaces are talking about, which is automation. You know, how do we get our plants where we're manufacturing everything from corrugated to other types of packaging or printing, just about everything. Those folks are constantly talking about how to tweak the system and make it more efficient and rely a little bit less on labor. And labor being one of the issues that we've seen some issues with, of course, since COVID-19. So Diane is doing exactly that kind of work. And I thought, let's hear about Rigorous Technology and what the company's doing for its customers and learn a little bit more about robotics in particular.
It's a perfect opportunity to share a little bit about what we've been working on and also hear your thoughts on it and also where you see the industry moving in the future.
Well, you know, and I really want to learn about, you know, the company and the background, but I'll answer your question that you just raised there is that, you know, labor, that is, when I talk about labor, it's good personnel to run packaging companies, run printing companies, other manufacturing environments. And I think that it's fair to say before COVID-19, it was not so easy to find the right folks for some reason, and we know some of the reasons. I shouldn't make a mystery out of it, but COVID-19 accentuated that problem. So you may have a core of really solid folks, but you want to do more with your business. And if you're relying on labor and the availability of enough hands, human hands, you're going to be limited as to how you can scale your business and grow. And so virtually everybody at trade shows in all of those industries talk about how can I automate and how can I make my business more efficient. So that's really where it comes from. You know, it's that burning question of how do I do more with, you know, with as many people, in some cases a few fewer people. So that's really where it all comes from. It's really just a basic need to keep the business going and you know, develop the people that you have, maybe put them in other positions, give them new opportunities, and take some of the repetitive work out of the manufacturing process.
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of industrial robotics companies really focus on dull, dirty, and dangerous tasks as ripe for automation. And we really see robotics and automation as a force multiplier for human ingenuity, not necessarily a replacement. So there will be specific tasks on a factory floor, heavy lifting, a lot of rotation, a lot of repetition, things that, you know, aren't inherently great for the human body or for our creative capacity. And those are the areas that, one, often have the best return on investment because it's a straightforward practice that lends well to machines. But two, it gets a lot of buy-in from the rest of the staff because it's not necessarily replacing a specific number of jobs on your floor, but it's replacing the need to do specific tasks. And especially in heavy lifting tasks, those are often shared by multiple people rather than one person's job day in and day out. So for example, one of the jobs that we'll likely talk about today, operators were lifting 8,000 pounds every hour. And so that is a really easy place for the management and operations to say, hey, I wonder if a machine could do it. But it's also a place where all of the operators, when they see a machine come in, they were excited about it because they knew that they would be freed up to do other activities that were better uses of their creative energy.
Yeah, and if you're taking 8,000 pounds of lifting per hour out of the human element, I would think just as a matter of risk management, you're also reducing the number of times that people will get injured in the process.
Absolutely. We had someone come up to us at an installation and tell us, hey, I just went to my doctor and I told him, I don't have back pain anymore. And his doctor asked him, well, what's different? And the one thing is not doing this heavy lifting activity. And that's one single example from one installation. But I think for us, it really tied back to why we're doing this in the first place. We're building robots to help humans. And when we hear firsthand about an impact that it has on someone's life and someone's health, that makes us feel great about what we're doing and who we're doing it for.
And I love your phrase, force multiplier, too, because that just, by its very language, suggests that you're just looking to improve people's experience and not replace them.
Absolutely. And for us, we find ways to make people more efficient so that they can oversee multiple machines rather than just feed one. So that the same people who were loading the machine are now robotics operators after a few training sessions. We really see the same people being involved in the process. And so everything that we design for the operator in mind, to make sure that the safety features are natively embedded, to make sure that things are easy to use and understand regardless of native language. So we really take a lot of time to make them function like machines that all of these operators are very familiar with, even if this is the first robot or one of the first robots that are in production in their facility.
So tell us a little bit about Rigorous Technology. When did you form it? I know you're in Vermont, but tell us a little bit about how you've grown over the years and how you got into robotics.
So we started in January 2020, which was quite an interesting time to start a business. But it really overall did lend ourselves to taking a very measured, conservative approach to growth. So I think, we all go on our own journeys as business owners, and that just is a core part of who we are. But our team largely came from marine robotics. They came from the underwater industry. And so my husband and co-founder, as well as many of our engineers, they got their experience working on systems for the Navy, for treasure hunters and other private enterprise, for other government agencies, such as NOAA. They really were all over the world looking at dozens of different robots and architectures in partnership with dozens of private and public enterprises. And so Colin, my husband, he was their head of program development. So he was in charge of all novel robotic development programs. And he got a firsthand view of all of these different software architectures. And the thing about marine is that you can't put GPS on a robot and send it down the bottom of the ocean because GPS doesn't work underwater. You can't put a PLC on one of these robots either. So you're in this constrained environment that really required them to leapfrog in terms of technological advancement to create systems that were sending high-valued robots down to the bottom of the ocean autonomously. And so when we moved to industrial and founded Rigorous in 2020, we thought that the technological gap would be larger in marine than in industrial, because industrial is a huge industry. There are so many more businesses, and automation has been prevalent since the 70s, 80s, 90s. But what we found is that because there were so many systems that worked well in the field, that they weren't adopting as many of these advanced computer science protocols and modern software architectures that would allow them to do more complex things with their robotics. So we really saw that as a gap that we hope to fill, and we're doing so by creating purpose-built applications for operators, but leveraging a really modern software architecture that can do things like native embedded vision systems. And we run simulations of all of our cells before we cut a single piece of metal. And so we're able to do a lot with a small team and come out the other end with systems that work great for our customers.
Well, that's amazing. And if you can get to your point, if you can get the robots to work in an underwater environment in the ocean, you're doing okay when you're on dry land. I suppose it's a little bit simpler, but harder at the same time when you're doing more complex tasks.
Absolutely. And there are more people around. There's a much more highly regulated environment. Safety is such a big concern. So it's different. It's certainly not just a linear apples to apples comparison, but foundationally, it gave our team the understanding of how robots work at its most core level, that we're able to take that learning and understanding into these systems.
So when you started the company in January of 2020, obviously COVID really hits, or it was hitting already, but certainly hit in March of that year. So what was the environment that you found in terms of industry? Did you find one that was looking for the kind of technology that you could provide, or were things in a difficult place at that point? Maybe people didn't know which way to go.
People didn't know which way to go quite yet, but even before COVID, people were starting to explore robotic automation in more niche applications. So it's been common in welding, pick and place, but we're starting to see more adoption of very unique one-off solutions. And so the first system that we developed actually was for slate roof manufacturing. And it was a vision and control system. So as random pieces of chip, so slate chip would be kind of chipped off a block in random sizes. It would scan under a vision system, and then there would be a bank of orders that have different dimensions of the roof tiles that they're looking for. And the vision system would identify the most efficient cut based on its cut list for the day. Then it would pick up the piece of slate, bring it to a saw, trim off 3 edges, and place it back on the conveyor so that it gets organized according to its size. That was a great system for us to work on. But as you can imagine, in March, that customer sent their entire team home for an undetermined period of time. People weren't quite sure what was happening or how they would navigate it. And so we were able to be very flexible with our customers. It's also helpful to be a small company that we're very agile and we can move as things change. And so we really took a partnership approach with a lot of our early customers in checking in, making sure that what we were developing was still in line with what they needed for that specific timeline, and then altering or tailoring new features according to new requirements that came up for them. So it was an interesting time. I think there was a lot of benefit in being small and agile while we were navigating so much uncertainty. But certainly the challenges were there well before COVID started that put more manufacturers in the direction of automation.
So you're in the construction materials business as your first customer. Where do you go from there? What were the next couple of projects? What industries did you find yourself in?
Well, actually, that project led directly to the first project in corrugated box manufacturing. So we had showed that video to the CEO of Accurate Box Company in New Jersey, who is a personal friend of both mine and Colin's. And essentially, they looked at that video. She looked at that video and she said, you know what? I've been looking for years for a pick and place solution for corrugated boxes. And I've talked to 5, 6 integrators and product development robotics companies who work in this industry, and they keep telling me it's not possible. They think my footprint's too small. They think the pallet management is too challenging. They think we process die-cut boxes as opposed to blanks that hadn't been die-cut yet, so they said the slots were a problem. And so they had hit a wall, and when they looked at the system for slate roof manufacturing, it kind of just clicked in her head. She's like, I actually don't think these are all that different of a solution. And so we started conversations with her team. They have great engineers on her team, so they were really collaborative during even just the proposal process before we even got to design. And we went back and forth looking at all of their product types that they wanted to run through, getting all of the requirements we could get listed until we really believed, I think we can actually solve this problem for you. And so that kicked off the development of the first pre-feeding robot in the packaging industry. So it's funny that things can jump from one industry to the next, but I think it really demonstrates how all of these modules that we build for a robotics platform are reusable in different products for different industries. And every time that we build and deploy one, it gets field tested so that when we're developing new systems, 60–80% of it is already baked, already in another system where it's deployed in the field. And so even though it's a completely new industry, there's a lot of lessons that we learn as we navigate through them.
I guess I could see some commonality between what you'd expect a slate tile manufacturer would do as compared to a corrugated box company. You've got a flat object. You've got probably very similar moves in some respects, although obviously the industries couldn't be more different from each other. But to your point, you're learning as you go every time you put in a new system.
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest similarities is that both of them are natural products and they don't show up 100% uniform all the time. And so I think where others have failed is not being able to detect the real inputs of the cell. So corrugated, for example, if it's more humid or less humid, it will affect the density of each box and thus it will affect the weight. And so that will change how much it can lift, the robot can lift, what its full capacity is. It will also just change the way that things are maneuvered in the cell. Another thing is, the reality of most corrugated facilities that use pallets is that boards shuffle back and forth on the pallets a little bit as they're getting moved with forklifts or as they're coming out of the die cutter. They're not going to be exactly in the same place at the same time each and every time. And so the system had to be dynamic. It had to be able to sense these differences, and then it had to make smart adjustments based on what those inputs are. And I think that's really where we were able to succeed, is figuring out what the differences would be and how it showed up, and then being flexible and accommodating automatically in the system.
So in that particular scenario where you're in the corrugated industry, would you say that the rigorous system supplemented, or did it replace some, piece of the manufacturing process?
Before the robot, they had 2 operators who were loading the machine at one time. Now they have 1 operator overseeing the robot who's about 40% allocated. So our most efficient system that we have developed is actually 2 box hoppers, is what we call our pre-feeding robots. They're 2 box hoppers mirrored on each other. So 1 operator is controlling both cells. And that takes 4 operators down to 1. And again, that's just for the specific task. I think most manufacturers that we talk to, they have a core team of people that they keep staffed, and then they have a lot of temps that they pull in as demands needs. And so we're really trying to find a solution that someone could actually do that job all day long and not have to be swapped out every 2 hours with other people on their team. They can really learn the robot and the system and do it efficiently and increase their proficiency at it over time.
Yeah, and what I'm always curious about, Diane, is so you've replaced essentially 3 employees who can go do other things in the process. But there's always some number of humans in the factory. Do you ever foresee that the robotics that you've designed could really take over and run a plant on their own without a lot of oversight?
I think we're pretty far away from that. And for us, it's not really the direction that we're focusing. I think there's so much low-hanging fruit out there for tasks that can be automated to not change the entire operational process of the plant. And a lot of the companies we work with, they're family businesses. They're 3rd, 4th, 5th generation. And they've stood the test of time by iterating over time, incrementally, but constantly. And we really are attracted to that. So rather than recommend an entire process be retooled or the whole plant layout be changed so that we can reduce as many people as possible, we really want our customers to have success with automation in a limited way that makes them want to continue to invest in the future. Get your feet wet, have some success, see that return on your investment that kind of fuels the next thing. We think that's a much better path for mature businesses moving into automation than trying to do a major overhaul all at once while we're still in pretty early stages with that. And if you were to move in that direction, you really do need an in-house robotics team, because you are going to have so many systems up that are determined to work with each other that you don't want any single part of the line down. Otherwise, it's going to mess up the entire operational flow. And so that's really where we get.
So you were saying that you'd rather focus on an element and make the improvement, get adoption, and then move on to the next rather than throwing the entire process up in the air, right?
Absolutely. And I think, 10, 15 years ago, robots started infiltrating corrugated box manufacturing with mixed results. And so some people have had systems running in the field and they're really happy with them. And some people have had systems that either couldn't keep up with the rate that human operators could work through, or they faulted so much that they just weren't seen as reliable. Some of these are decommissioned and some of these are just customers are unhappy with them. And that does more for the decision making of an industry than not. I think a lot of people, even who didn't have that direct relationship, they know that story about someone who felt like they got burned. And so for this case, I think having positive experiences with automation are going to roll in down the hill into larger and larger and larger experiences. I think that's the right path to take rather than going full bore in unless robotics is a part of your core competencies as a company.
So when do you think, Diane, whether it's a corrugated plant or some other type of manufacturing environment, what's the best time for an owner to think about robotics? Is it when they're experiencing a problem, or is it when they're buying new equipment, for example? Is there an ideal time, or is there a time that's better than others to think about using a robot?
I think the best time to think about automation is when you're slow, which is a little unintuitive, I would say. But when you're slow, you have the time, you have the resources in your staff to give it the attention that it really needs to make sure that you're getting the product that fits your process requirements. I think the flip side is most people reach out to us when they're gangbusters crazy. They'll say, we have more orders than we have ever had, and we are having trouble finding anyone to staff our machines consistently. And so they're in the heat of that pain when they reach out, but the reality is they're actually at a disadvantage for being able to take the time to specify the system and make sure that they've really been able to communicate and learn all of the requirements along the way. We're happy to speak to anyone at either stage, even if you're just exploring. We get a lot of value out of just meeting people in the corrugated industry and learning about their goals and experience with automation. So I would encourage folks to reach out, even if they don't have a specific project in mind, even if they're just starting to think about how might this fit in. Absolutely.
Where do you see the industry going? When I say the industry, I mean the use of robotics in corrugated or in other industries. Like over the next 2 to 3 to 4 years, do you expect any major jumps in the technology? Or would it be a period in which companies are adopting the existing technology with little tweaks along the way?
I think we're right in a stage of the latter. Companies are adopting existing technology with small tweaks. And I think that's a great place to be in. I think that there's a lot, I think I've said the term low-hanging fruit at least once, if not twice already on this call, but I think there's so much low-hanging fruit out there that can be automated without having to develop something that's truly novel or truly never been done before. And the more we move into these industries, the more we see more niche applications, more one-off solutions, more hyper-specific, and those are great, but I think we get more value earlier on through things that there are many of them throughout the country. And so there's shared spare parts, there's great customer service, there's a team that can support the systems rather than, just whoever wrote that one-off custom solution in the first place. And so beyond just the experience of using a robot. I think the experience of working with robotics companies and getting comfortable with their customer support, and really we partner with maintenance teams to make sure that everyone understands what's going on and can troubleshoot issues when they arise. It's a lot of relationship building that will need to be developed between the corrugated industry and the robotics industry before we start exploding solutions. I think we're still in early days of establishing those partnerships for the long haul.
As I said before, about corrugated and the similarity with the slate roof tile manufacturer, you have a rigid board or a rigid object that's naturally susceptible to being picked up by a robot. Do you foresee robots going into other types of technology that you would find in a print or packaging business? Something that is, roll to roll, or something flexible like flexible packaging, for example.
I think the sky's the limit, honestly, especially once you move into mobile robots and away from the stationary 6-axis pick-and-place robots. And something that I love to see when I visit corrugated plants are some of these automated material handling solutions, conveyors on a track that feed multiple different lines of conveyors. I think that all of that is going to slowly move to autonomous conveyor systems. But the process is already in place. They're already getting experience with automation and material handling. I think material handling will be the place to look for corrugated robotics in the near future. But I really do believe the sky's the limit overall in terms of what physical mechanical tasks can be done by robotics. People are coming out with soft grippers that can pick things up with a lot of dexterity. We're seeing things that don't even look like traditional robots. They move in a way that there are no visible motors. And so when academia and industry combine, we're going to see real applications for some of this novel technology that can do really interesting things that even I hesitate to speculate on.
Mm-hmm. Well, talk about being on the forefront of technology in the industry. You guys are really on the tip of the spear, so to speak. So really interesting stuff. If you're listening to the podcast, and you can check out Rigorous Technology on social media or on the web, you'll be really, really impressed by the videos and the examples of the things that Diane and her team have been able to do. So very cool, Dan.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for directing folks' attention that way.
No, it's one of the many bright spots in printing and packaging, for sure, to see the cutting edge technology that really makes it an interesting couple of industries. This is not I hate to sound trite about it, but this is not your parents' corrugated industry. It's full of good and interesting technology. Processes are amazing. And you talked about sort of a dirty facility or a dirty place. None of the plants that I've seen are even close to that. It looks like modern. They're modern. They're clean. They're bright and full of good technology, for sure.
Absolutely. And I think what we've seen with high graphics printing has really showcased the capabilities of this industry. And same for any family business, but a lot of these businesses, family business or otherwise, they reinvent themselves every 20 years in what types of packaging they're creating and what technology they're using to create it with. And so this is just another part of what's coming next.
Well, you'll be at the forefront of whatever it is that we see. So very cool. I really appreciate the chance to talk to you and to spotlight Rigorous Technology. Diane, if you could tell people that are listening where they can find more information about the company and the things that you do.
That's great. Thank you so much. For folks listening, you can visit us on the web at rigorous.co. And you can reach me directly, Diane at rigoroustech.com. Be happy to speak to anyone who listens here.
Well, it was a great experience talking to you, Diane. Thanks so much. And I appreciate you jumping on to share, because that's at the end of the day what the podcast is all about.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you. So we're gonna sign off for today, Diane. So again, this is Diane Abruzzini Riggs from Rigorous Technology in Vermont, doing some amazing things on the technology side of corrugated and printing industries and others as well. And I'm Chris Santomassimo signing off on behalf of the Think Factory podcast powered by OGC Solutions. We'll see you next time.